And now, conference, we're going to hear from Christopher Nieper, founder of the David Nieper Educational Trust.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk about left behind communities. And I'd like to thank Boris Johnson for mentioning the plea of left behind communities in his inaugural speech on the steps of Downing Street. Thank you, Boris. I have worked in a small former coal mining town in Derbyshire called Alfreton for the last 30 years. And my family business employs 300 people there making clothes. That's textiles. And we're one of the few businesses to have never gone offshore to the Far East in search of cheap labour. We've always remained loyal to local skills and local people. Thank you. Thank you. We've employed them through thick and thin. But I can tell you, I am worried about the next generation. So I went to our local school, and I was horrified to find that it should have 1,000 pupils, but it was only 1/3 full. It had had 5 head teachers in 5 years. The deputy head was in prison for a paedophile case. It had lost its 6th form entirely, and it was in the bottom 2% of the whole of the United Kingdom for its attainment. Imagine that. And that is why left behind communities get left behind. By the way, Boris Johnson calls them left behind communities. I think we call them forgotten communities. It's much the same thing, but I know he cares about it. Anyway, I had an idea that maybe the world of private enterprise could get involved in education and support it by putting vocational relevance into the curriculum. And when we had this idea, the Secretary of State for Education at the time, Nicky Morgan, did us the courtesy of turning up on our doorstep. And she said to me, "Christopher, you know, if this works, it could apply in any secondary school in the UK. And it could be particularly effective in former industrial towns and seaside towns. And if it would turn around failing schools, then that would be even better." So we set about it. We formed an educational trust. I bought a new uniform for every single child in the school. We hired a new head teacher, and I can tell you now that after 2.5 years, the intake of the school has tripled, and the school is now oversubscribed for the first time in 30 years. Thank you. The attainment has improved, the attendance has improved, the behaviour has improved, and I think in this room, you're all One Nation Conservatives. We are all One Nation Conservatives. And I think there's a role for private enterprise to stimulate growth from within local economies. And there's a role for private enterprise to get involved in education and take responsibility for the next generation, for the talent which will keep us going for the next 50 years. By the way, our company's been there for 50 years, and I think we need the next generation. And the Conservative Party will need the next generation for the next 50 years as well. We cannot ignore these young people. So I think it's time to stop talking about social mobility and start doing something about it. So, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sajid, is it possible to give some tax incentive to encourage private enterprise to take some responsibility for the communities in which they operate? Because I think this could be expandable throughout the country. And by the way, after Brexit, we're going to need this young talent, aren't we? The Centre for Social Justice, who I'd like to thank for inviting me here today, has identified 204 towns similar to Alfreton with a similar level of deprivation. And that's 5 million people who could work in this way. And they would all be candidates to vote for the Conservative Party, I'm sure, one day. So thank you very much, Boris Johnson, for putting social mobility at the heart of policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Christopher, you touched in your speech about the potential to replicate or scale up. I think you referred to a conversation with our Secretary of State and DCMS at an earlier point. I just wonder whether you could briefly expand on how that might happen.
Yes. Look, I don't think there is any silver bullet which can come from Westminster which will solve the ills of our communities. There's no brilliant educational idea we're going to get from Singapore or from Scandinavia or something like this. No, communities have got to grow from within. We've got to generate the British economy from within local communities. That's how we have strength right across the country. So I think, if I look at my own workforce, the best people we've got are local people, local jobs for local people. And if we can persuade the wealth creators in this country to invest in local communities and give opportunities for high-level jobs and build those communities into desirable places to live and work, turn them into green towns, into eco-towns, into places that people really want to be, then we'll generate growth from within. I don't think there's any other way. Just do it the Conservative way. Thank you.
Thanks. Would anyone else like to add anything about what government should be doing? Christopher, you look on the edge of your seat. Tell us.
I have an idea of how this government could energise local communities and energise the young talent. Our company, for one, would be happy to sponsor a school, and our company is happy to sponsor young people through university. Why doesn't the Chancellor take the very successful research and development tax credit and create another version, learning and skills tax credit, and incentivise employers like us to sponsor pupils through school and give free tuition fees at university? That would be a terrific win for this government. Now, I can see how it can be done, because they're doing it in Germany. It's earn while you learn. You spend time at a company and you spend time at the university and you have a degree with parity of value. So I think that would be a Conservative principle, to incentivise the wealth creators and the enterprise world to sponsor education and look after the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you.